So let's go ahead and get started. Hi, I'm with Mike Koslov and Joe Blank, who are the directors of Friends from Home. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So your film is like Kerouac meets Ford meets Crosby and Hope almost. What tell us about the genesis of this, and was it really just as simple as one of you guys is moving out west and said, "Hey, let's make a film"?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, well, thank you, first of all. Those are kind references slash, yeah, references. We joked about Kerouac actually on our road trip. I was trying to read on the road. We got busy. I never finished it. But yeah, I mean, it sort of started of right before this road trip. I was living in New York, and Mike was here in LA, where we're both now at. We've been friends since college, so we were talking and have kept up communication. And I had just finished making a feature film in New York that was a like romantic drama film, and I had shot all of it on this Blackmagic pocket camera that I had. And so I had the camera, and then at that time it was during the pandemic. It was summer of 2020, and I was thinking of moving to LA for just personal life reasons. And me and Mike have always just been fans of kind of these like independent, low budget filmmakers. Some of them, being like the Duplass brothers or Joe Swanberg, or even just the references you mentioned. I was, thinking of Kelly Reichardt's film Old Joy, which was, so we sort of started talking about doing a project together, and also maybe doing it while I was moving out from New York to LA. So Mike being from Jersey as well, it was kind of just like an easy sort of like, he'd come back east and then we'd spend a month on the road. So we planned out like a month, and before then we had outlined this whole story of just these two friends, these childhood friends that sort of reconnect on the road, and kind of exploring like friendships and how they change and how like life paths change. But essentially we just went out on the road too, is just sort of trying to find a lot of it there, and find like based on the locations or based on like, our conversations and such. So that's kind of how it started. And then we ventured out.
Yeah. And so what school did you go to? You were talking about film school.
We both went to Syracuse. Go Orange.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where Joe and I met, and we ended up working on a few projects together. He acted in my thesis film. I shot his thesis film, and we also shot a film in Prague together. So we had a little bit of a history of working together. So I think when we were deciding what to do next, the pandemic was going on full-fledged, and I was like desperate for anything creative. I'd gotten out of college, and it was like 2 years of just like working in this like rental house, which was a good experience, but man, did I miss like doing something creative. And Joe and I are both people who I think can jump into something and sort of just go with the flow as far as shooting goes. And we were like, let's not overthink this. Let's just go out there and shoot this thing. And as he said, he had experience with Roman Candle, shooting something that was his previous feature, which was sort of shot in a somewhat similar way, at least parts of it. And I had experience with a short I had shot in college, which was similar, which was like, let's just make an outline and shoot this, and sort of come up with the script as we go.
So it was a very basic outline that you set out with, and then, so how would you flesh things out on the road? What were some like? There's that reference to Niagara Falls. I think everybody talks about. What was so objectionable about Niagara Falls?
Yeah, I mean, I still have mixed feelings about Niagara Falls, but
I like it.
we were also on the U.S. side, so I've never been to the Canadian side, so I hear that's
what I've heard. Yeah,
I've heard it's a whole other experience, but Yeah, I mean, I think it would happen sort of, it happened sort of naturally. I mean, I think before the trip, me and Mike did a bunch of Zoom calls and we just talked about like references and we talked about just, like what we kind of wanted to do. And we sort of spitballed like a bunch of ideas. So a lot of them didn't make it into the film. I mean, I think we were aware before going that like we couldn't be too ambitious in terms of trying to make a movie on the road and traveling and it's just us because essentially the whole movie outside of the outlier characters that appear, it's really just me and Mike. So at one point I think we outlined like a story about like aliens, and I think that would have been too hard to do on the road. But we kept coming back to just the idea of just being truthful and honest to like our experience, like our experiences with like friendships, with just these things that we care about and we like seeing in movies, just like focusing on like two humans and their sort of relationship and how it can change. So we just tried to be as honest as we could. I mean, as we were traveling, I think we were feeling that as well. Like if we saw a location or we had sort of like we knew we were going somewhere, we would, we spent a lot of time in the car. So it was these long drives where me and Mike
Right.
were just talking about things and like, there'd be times where we'd be like, oh, let's do this because we're going to be at Mount Rushmore. We just did the scene about Niagara Falls. That was like us kind of making fun of it. Maybe if we do like sort of like a sequel to that scene in Mount Rushmore, and things kept happening like that where we were sort of like, we knew where we were going and we had a lot of time in the car and it's just us. So essentially we were rehearsing even or coming up with the like script on the road.
Did you
Yeah.
have, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just gonna say, I think sometimes it was like us sitting in the car trying to figure out a scene and like, what are we gonna say? And then other times it'd be like, oh, look, this area over here looks cool. This gas station. I know we need a connective story for like getting to this one house. Let's just go and spend like 10 minutes shooting something as quickly as we can. And I think that resulted in some cool like creative choices and some just very free. I mean, it was so free to be able to just like shoot whatever. And we weren't worried about like, oh my gosh, we like didn't shoot scene 5 correctly. There was just like nothing. So it was like we built it as we went. It was very free.
A lot of times.
And I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say to piggyback off that. I think to Mike's point, I think something that was it actually ended up being just like a blessing in disguise was sort of the restrictions of the project. Sort of because it was just us and we were traveling from east to west. We obviously we could never turn back. So we were shooting it all chronologically. So I think what that did was sort of force both of us to think about more intently, like what we just did and like kind of like to what Mike said, like, oh, we shot this last scene in Colorado. We need like a shot of, Wyoming, Montana to sort of just show that we're transitioning to more west. Like, I think we were both aware as it was going on, like of the sort of movie in our heads and keeping track of it. Like, just so we can know like, oh, we just did a dramatic scene. Maybe if we did like a funnier scene here where we're reconnecting or, oh, we just had that whole thing of our friend Colin in Syracuse where it was about like our friendships and, me going to college and Mike's character not like, so maybe by the time we get to like our friend Sahan's house in Iowa, we do something else about like a friend or a mutual friend.
Right.
Yeah.
So, is there moments in there, like, can you point to anywhere, like where the acting, like, is there a blurry line between when you're acting or when you're just experiencing your road trip? And did any of that make it in? Is there even a line there?
I think, well, it's interesting because now we've shot this like a few years back. It took us a while to like finish it with, just restrictions and work and stuff. So I think looking back as a whole, it is such a nice, refreshing piece to me and Joe, I think both, to be like, oh, wow, this road trip we went on. And it brings up so many like memories.
Yeah.
So in that way, there's like a large connection, I think, for a strong connection for both of us. And I think watching it back, I think the moments that maybe ring more true, at least for me, are maybe just some of the comedy moments. where like, you know, we're a little outside maybe the character and playing closer to ourselves and just like trying to have fun with it and laugh.
Right.
And those moments are like conversations or things I think me and Joe are more likely to have than, let's say, me breaking down on the side of the road about like where my life's going, you know, like that scene, that car scene where I'm like breaking down. There's a, like, I feel connected to it, but it doesn't feel like, I mean, that feels like this character versus like us joking about like, oh, you're like a vegetarian now. Like that does feel like a little closer to us, where like we're sort of like reconnecting. And I think that's one thing that me and Joe maybe now take for granted, but like at the time we had graduated college, had been living in 2 different cities for about like a year and a half, 2 years, Joe. So like we had kept up and talked, and Joe had visited and I had visited New York, and we'd seen each other, but we weren't really like, it wasn't like we were these close friends, you know, where we were talking every single day. And now through this movie, we sort of did reconnect. This movie led to us like reigniting our friendship. So in a way, those parts where we're like, you know, like what's going on, some of that hits a little closer to home. But yeah, I'd say in general, those moments where we're joking is definitely closer to like who we are. I mean, when Joe's joking about that hat in that early scene in that Acadia, like that's something, you know, that didn't happen necessarily, but like it's, I feel like that's so, you know, Joe to like sort of point out, and so for me to have like response, like that does feel very grounded in some way.
Right. Now you've got all this footage shot, you know, from across country, and you must have had, you know, just tons of it. What was it like trying to edit this down into something that, you know, is a story?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a lot more scenes actually than ended up being in the movie. But I think, you know, we had to. I mean, I think the bare bones was there. The sort of arc or the character arc was there. But the editing process was long. It was sort of us figuring out kind of what worked, and also us trying to be sort of objective about it too, as much as we could, because we were editing it, and it is like us editing ourselves. I think, you know, a lot of it was like, does this work more for the character, or does this work because we find this funny ourselves, or something? So I think like almost piggybacking off what Mike said, because I really agree about the road trip. Like it was like almost the editing process was like not the opposite, but trying to find the story outside of our, like what we find funny, or like what we you know, trying to be strict about that. So it took a while. I think we tried a lot of things and just did a few editing techniques. I think most of the story was like chronological, so it helped in like we shot it chronologically, so it helped in that way. I think we went back and did some sort of putting this piece there and this piece there, but I think that's the good thing about shooting chronologically, is like, you know, where to start basically.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty similar to like editing a doc, where we're like, what's the story? Like we know the general gist, but like what's those points in between? And I think for us, something like we threw in those title cards for where we were traveling, like that was like probably 2/3 into editing. Like we had experimented with some other forms, but that seemed to be the best way to connect everything together. So those types of things. And the good thing about me and Joe, I think both, is like we're very willing to try stuff. So we were trying jump cuts. We were trying like ramping up the speed of the footage, and trying these different things that made it feel even more doc style, where we're just like seeing what plugs into what to work. And then just patching those little holes of like, okay, we figured out most of the story, but I remember something me and Joe had early on was like watching it, was our characters were a little bit too maybe butting heads a little too quickly. So what we started doing was like doing voiceovers over those montage scenes, or those like drone shots with the car. So we added 1 or 2 of those to try and like alleviate that pressure. And that was something we only found through the edit. We didn't have in the footage.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and oh no, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I guess, you know, when you look back over all that, it must be, you know, like, oh wow, this is kind of almost, you know, not totally different from what you were shooting, but you see the story when you're able to see it from overhead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think it's a way more. I think watching it back, I'm like, wow, we made this comprehensive or this complete package of a movie that I think prior to like when we first ended, we're like, oh, we got so much stuff, but it felt like, how are we actually going to build like a house out of this? How are we actually going to find the structure? And I think both me and Joe were able to bounce off and really trim the movie down to like a nice 72 minutes, but you know, it keeps moving forward. And I think that's something as we experimented with different scenes, we're like, we don't need this scene to be this long. Let's just keep moving. Let's keep going. But it felt great. Joe, sorry, cut you off there a little in the beginning.
Oh no, you're good. Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, to piggyback off that, I mean, I think something like Mike said that we did sort of find more in the edit was if you see the film, there's a few shots of me like talking on the phone or sort of like you know, calling someone. And I had various ideas about that when we were shooting it, but then, you know, when we were in the editing process, it became more clear that this movie was sort of hearkening into like certain real feelings we had and real things we were experiencing. And, you know, I had my dad, sort of my real dad, like fill in the sort of phone call on that end, because, you know, that was something that I was actually dealing with, was, you know, part of my hesitation with leaving home in real life was sort of, you know, my parents' health issues and leaving that and being far away from that. So that was something that during the editing process we sort of found and we talked about, of just being honest about that and like, you know, trying to make that a little more impactful just by including that. So, I mean, thankfully my parents were like up for it. But yeah, that was just an example of like in post we sort of found that. And then there were some scenes that, to what we were talking about earlier, like there were certain scenes that felt almost like rehearsed or felt like real scripted scenes at times, like where during the editing process it would just be like, oh, thank God, like we have line, and they're sort of similar. But then there were other times where we're like, oh, we have that line in the bin, like let's maybe put that here because that would fit here, or like we have your expression from back here. So it was a lot of just like normal editing techniques of like Mike said, like in a documentary or more free form, where you can use different things just because it wasn't so rigid. It wasn't like, you know,
there is no like even that. I mean, there's no one on set besides me and Joe. That's it. So there was no one to keep track of that stuff. So in the edit, there's a lot of us trying to fix things, and you know, I think we got to a place that felt good.
I think so, absolutely. So, well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time to talk with us. We certainly enjoyed your film, and best of luck in the future.
Oh yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for including us in the festival, and we were so bummed not to be able to sort of make it out there, but it's so great to share this movie. So we really do appreciate you sharing it with everybody and sitting down with us. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.